Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together. After thinking about their story elements for a whole week, we combine them together like a couple of awesome ingredients into one very delicious story pie. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. As a recap for last week's story, which I believe we're continuing on, is that correct?
I believe so.
Oh, I thought we were starting fresh. Oh yeah, no, never mind. We're episode 2. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. We live in a world, or kind of an area of the world. So I think Seth had government type. So the government is kind of families, like series of families, and there's like rights go to like family members, and like where you are in the family really matters. And there's lots of sort of bickering back and forth as to who has the higher position based on, you know, where they are in the family. We were introduced to the villain, who was a bastard, person born without any rank and given no ability to have any sort of position in the family, and achieved a book about taking revenge on your family, and that was the villain's sidekick. And so he's like gathering up all the outcasts and all the people who are pushed out and are trying to sort of seed rebellion in the world. What was the other story element?
Hero's sidekick,
and that was Reed's.
Yeah.
It was that girl.
Lucy the gearhead. Yeah.
Lucy the gearhead, yeah.
Yeah, and her dad had kind of gone into like milling.
Yeah.
And because there wasn't really like, you know, his family had land and they were, you know, farmers and ranchers, and
right.
He didn't see a place for himself there, but they were always needing stuff. And he married a brilliant woman who was an engineer, kind of a natural engineer, and they would make stuff and milling and blacksmithing and that kind of thing.
Right, and that is where we pick up here. What story elements did you guys have this week? I had Pantheon, and then I also decided to make the Wise Old Woman as well.
I had a magic system and unique artifact.
I had Hero and Quartet.
Nice. I want to hear about the magic system.
Okay.
Does that sound fine, Seth?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the magic system sort of grew out of it was some people that were involved in a kind of a discipline of meditation. It didn't start out being anything more than kind of a self-help sort of a thing where, you know, people got together and they did stretching exercises and they kind of were winging it, you know, and the idea is they would get into a state of meditation. I just about said medication. But,
type of medication.
That works too.
But there were among this group, none of them are entirely sure how they first sort of connected with this ability. They think it might have something to do with this park area of this park where they would meet on nice days, you know, when the weather permitted, where they could kind of gather in a circle and do their thing and enjoy the nature and the tweeting birds and whatnot. And they, as near as they can, some of the people think that there was a kind of like a membrane or a fissure or a warp in the universe at this place. And as they did their meditations and they sought out the place of their core and connecting with, you know, the world around them and quieting their spirits, a few of them began to connect with kind of an understanding on a very elemental level of the nature of heat and cold. Like if it was a really warm day, a couple of them realized that when they were in this place of meditation, they could literally cool the air and gather the heat that was in the air around them and just slide it away. And it would just, instead of being, you know, 88 degrees and muggy, it would be, you know, 70 degrees and nice, you know?
Right.
And a couple of them say, I just had this great experience. You know, I did too. And this is how it happened. Well, this was generations ago. And little by little, and they kind of kept this to themselves, and they had among themselves, they called themselves the keeper of the secret flame. And they began developing this ability to where you could steal the heat that was in the air around you or in front of you and gather that heat together and create a hot spot. Or they at first they got a kick out of it because they could light candles with it, and they could, and then they could, freeze. They also realized that there was some, like, air was very pliable, but water was denser and it was easier to collect the heat out of the water. And yet they would, like, freeze a pond in the middle of summer and create a torch of fire. Well, anyway, this got going on, and one of the people that were involved in this secret society was Lucy's mom. And in the heat, of course, in the smithy was a really good thing to be able to control. And so anyway, there were very few. It was difficult to teach to people. Not every one of the meditators could do it, but every once in a while, another one would catch on how this worked, and the possibilities hadn't even begun to be really explored. In terms of what it could do as a weapon, how quickly these elements could be manipulated, but literally taking the heat out of the surrounding air and creating intense heat. Well, one of the things that took place is in the smithy, it really is handy if you can just gather the heat from the coals.
Right.
And then you realize you don't even need coals. You just throw some rocks in the forge, and you just gather the heat from it, and you can melt the stuff you need to melt and do the thing you need to do. And there was just a lot of experimentation, and that's how the artifact was formed. They had a ceramic, like, crucible that they used to melt metals, and they got a, I don't know, wolfram, I think is the name of the metal that in its raw form. They got a piece of this material, and one of the things they knew about it is it was almost impossible to melt. Well, it was what we know as tungsten, but it was number 74 on the periodic table, W, and it has a melting temperature of like 6,192 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, it's outside of carbon.
Yeah.
It's the most difficult thing on the planet to melt. And because it has this high, we know it is like in filaments in high power lights, for example, because they don't melt. You can run a lot of power through them, get them really bright, and it won't melt. So that's really cool. But anyway, so they were trying to melt this stuff, and they kept the crucible, of course, is supposed to be, ceramic. It's supposed to, withstand great temperatures, but they tried it, and the crucible would melt. And then they realized what we've got to do is continuously suck the heat out of the crucible itself into the metal until finally they got it to melt. And they formed a crucible out of this metal, this tungsten. And normally tungsten is formed by, dry powder metallurgy. It never actually melts, but they just get it very hot, and the particles can connect, and they make alloys and stuff, and it can be bonded and welded with other metals. But anyway, they actually got a lump of this stuff to melt, and it just congealed around the sides of the ceramic crucible it was in. But it was so intensely hot that when they stopped sucking the heat away from the old crucible, it just flaked away, and you had the tungsten crucible formed. Well, this was a crucible that, you could melt anything in this thing. It just absolutely would never, 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That, well, to melt granite is like, what, 1,000 degrees?
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, the problem though that was alarming and interesting that they didn't understand, because they actually melted this tungsten, which is not the way it had ever been handled before. It took on properties. So that steel, for example, that was melted down in this crucible would take on properties. And it was, it was called magical. Well, in a sense it was. It was drawing on, they call it, power forged. And it became the tools and parts made in this smithy that were made in this crucible became famous, and you can see the possibilities for this. But anyway, the magic system itself, was being used more and more as the understanding of how to manipulate it, branched out. But then the center of it was this mill and this crucible.
So how far along are we from the creation of that?
Well, this was created, literally the crucible was just created. I mean, when Lucy was just a few years ago, Lucy was alive. She's in her 20s. So her mom made it.
Okay, so still the people who have this magic.
Yeah, this had been going on for a few generations.
Oh, okay.
So there weren't very many, but it had been, its full potential hadn't really been realized. This was kind of the biggest, dangerous step,
Right. So it's relatively small, though. It's not like there's going to be like hundreds of people who have this ability.
Right.
Maybe tens at this point in time.
Yep.
Okay. So it's really localized.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. What do you guys want to hear about the Pantheon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so the Pantheon are the same people who laid down the government type, because it is a type of ancestry Pantheon system. So the Pantheon that they recognize is not worshipped like you'd worship. It's not looked to like you'd worship like God of the Bible. It's like, oh, the creator of everything and the sustainer of everything and the one who holds us all. It's not like that at all. Whatever force created the world, they have no idea. But they do visit the grave sites and the shrines of their ancestors. And there is some kind of power that comes back from that, like great grandpa was a farmer and he cut down all these trees in order to plant farms here. And so now we put part of our first fruits at his shrine, and those things that we put at his shrine never expire. Like they don't turn bad. They don't rot or anything, And if we don't do that, then the flood comes or something like that. So there is some kind of afterlife where especially extremely prominent family members, especially ones that represented great ideas, can kind of work backwards to support their families. They aren't all sitting in a big room together. I don't have it super well formed in my brain. So it's just kind of like, we bring food to our ancestors. We visit them. Our house is not centered around the shrine, but there is a shrine on the property for the ancestors. It's also where we bury them. It's the family graveyard. And we talk to them. And sometimes we receive information back, right? Sometimes there's inklings of where to go or how to do something based on, the wisdom of your family members. So it's kind of a pantheon and kind of not. The one thing that I also had was Wise Old Woman. And there's a reality about this, which is that the voice and the power it's mostly just the voice, like information that the ancestors have, is divided equally amongst their offspring. So if they have 10,000 offspring, it's all divided equally among them. So they might not be able to hear it. That's why typically when a clan gets big enough, it tends to stop worshiping its ancestors and turn into something else, because they just forget. They just don't experience that kind of close connection with the past, and therefore it just kind of fades away. That's why after like a big fight, so if there was like 100 of two clans were fighting and each of them had 100 people, and they just didn't really hear let's say more than 100, let's say 10,000 people, and they just didn't really hear the voice of the ancestors that much. And then they fight and they each lose 5,000 people, right? So that distributed voice from the ancestors now becomes twice as powerful.
Ooh.
And all of a sudden they both get religion and they both say, we have to go back. We have to go back to the family. We have to circle around the family and figure out what's going on and consult the ancestors. And it's kind of a safeguard that if a great tragedy happens, that they can go back and kind of remember where they came from, right? The Wise Old Woman is the one surviving member of a branch of a clan. And her connection to the clan is a matriarch who grew up and created her clan and was the one surviving member of her clan. The same catastrophe happened twice, like a sickness or a flood or something terrible. And she's this old, crazy old lady who lives up in the mountains, and she has the full stream consciousness of this ancestors pouring into her brain at all times, because there's no one to divide it with. It's just her.
Wow.
And so she has the knowledge of ages of time back before, and because of that, she's kind of crazy, because a person's ability to sort of handle that is so huge. And she is like, people are freaked out because sometimes they'll like send someone up, right? And they'll like hang out with her and they'll become really good friends with her, right? And then she'll quote unquote adopt them into her family because they're so helpful to her and they want to help her. And then she adopts them into her family and that consciousness splits and that person is just driven insane like immediately. And then she gets it back. And so she's just this really hard to deal with person who has basically knowledge of everyone and like understands everything. That's the wise old woman and the Pantheon. What do you think, Seth? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, there'd be some, in certain circumstance, there might be a temptation to like knock off your relatives if you wanted to like grow in this power, if you were like an evil like guy. But then, it also like, clan strength, like when the McGregors moved against who did the McGregors fight? The Campbells. They had a pretty big gang. And it's like, so there's strength in numbers, but diminished connection with the wisdom of the ages.
Right. The smaller you are, the more wisdom you have. The larger you are, the less you feel like you need it. And what ultimately happens is the larger you are, the quicker you get towards there being less of you.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so terrible for her. One thing that's terrible about her is that people want her to adopt people and to find someone who can handle the information, who's young, who can have children, who can keep this. But the thing is that this person is connected to one of the sisters of the family that founded this whole thing. It's like if she dies, all of her knowledge, all of her wisdom is gone.
Yeah. So there's this great, there's the incredible drive to, further your line. But at the same token, by doing so, you're diminishing the intensity of the gifting.
Right. And there's this great drive to further the line, but there's also the reality that whoever it is, for at least a couple of generations, is going to have to deal with this kind of constant consciousness in-stream of information. It's going to have to be the weird people for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Like how do children handle it? Is this something that comes on them? Like, is there glandular?
I would say it's like a puberty thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't get overwhelmed as a child because that would just be cruel and wretched.
Yeah.
That's like Aaliyah in Dune, the child that was in Jessica's womb when she took in the spice in its raw form, and she was suddenly flooded with the wisdom of the Bene Gesserit or whatever it was.
Right. It's been a minute since I've read Dune, but
yeah, sorry about that obscure reference.
No,
for all
that's
of
good.
You out there that don't.
That's a good. Dune is great. Yes, Reed. Exactly. It's like a gland thing. It's like puberty, basically.
I'm glad.
What's yours, Seth?
All right. So you had made a mention the other day or last week that this whole structure is kind of like Naruto. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of the idea for the quartet. And really, in this case, the quartet is many quartets. So in this model, and I don't know if we'd want to use this as like as the prophecy part or just as kind of a wise saying that's passed down. But because everything is such, family ties and, some of the things can very quickly become so segregated, into this family and that family.
Right.
What they do is, like if it's like a piece of wisdom that's passed down that, I'm trying to think of, like, I know there's a verse in the Bible where it talks about like the three braided, one, they can overcome, two
is stronger, but a
three-stranded
cord is not easily broken.
Who can break. Yeah. So it's like that concept. So what they do, so there's, and I don't know how to phrase it, but basically like that. And so what you'll have is different either wise men or sages or people of a certain profession will always take on like two or three. Most of the time, I would say like three apprentices, maybe sometimes four, but three would be kind of the number. But they always take them, normally from just, let's say, slight off branch clans.
Okay.
So that it kind of creates a bond between those, those three parts of the family.
Yeah.
Or parts of other families. So it'd be like the cobbler, like the cobbler, like, okay, I'm taking an apprentice. He wouldn't necessarily take his own son, or at least, not that he wouldn't at one point, but the son might go and, learn from an uncle or something if he was going to be a cobbler. But then, that way there wouldn't be a bias. But then what you have is everybody takes on like three apprentices. And sometimes they might veer in what they're doing. like one might then do cobbling and one might get into something else. But mainly they'll have like an adult mentor that will kind of bring them along. And it basically, you have these three people from either like, the distant off branches of the different clans that are all in the village, then they'll grow up and create a tighter bond for the next generation inside of the different clan structure, the different clans that are all involved in the village.
Yeah.
And so that's basically the quartet. It's not one particular, although I'm thinking, kind of tossed around. I don't know if I wanted, with that idea, I don't know if I wanted one particular hero or if the hero itself is not an abstract idea, but the concept. Go say, if we have the villain that's coming in, basically, if he's coming in trying to uproot and create tension between family ties, and kind of to get back at his own family,
right.
The real answer to the problem is going to be the unity between the different, people that are going to have to rise together, not necessarily one individual, but several groups of individuals that have, let's say, been raised this way, and then they all stand together against the villain coming in, be it, in a physical way, if it comes to confrontation, or if it's, simply in the imparting of knowledge and wisdom down to the next generations, in a way that binds, the different families and clans together instead of driving them apart. Now, unless we wanted a, more of a solid or a single quartet and hero.
No, I kind of like that. There has to be some. So the part of quartet is that fate is the thing that brings them together.
Right. So in that sense, okay, so that's the part I kind of left out. So what it is like, it'd be the elders, like it'd be like this lady, the wise old lady. Like they would bring, like, it'd be like, I don't know if it'd be like, okay, you're like graduating elementary school and going into high school. I don't know if that, there's middle school in between there. At whatever level, they basically pair these people up. Because the thing is it's not always just like, okay, oh wow, we're great friends and we're going to be in this, in the quartet together, or they're, that group. Because the idea, they want you to have your other friends, but then, you'll have the wise, that class of kids or whatever, that they'll be brought to the ancestral shrines or whatever. And then the wise old woman or someone of that nature, through their ancestral wisdom.
Yeah, I was thinking
up to different
some
groups.
sort of test of destiny and fate happens in order to select who will go to who and how things will be matched up.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I had Hero's sidekick, and this Lucy, I suggested that she might be taking an interest in somebody who had come along that wanted to kind of normalize fair trade and, create more bonds between the different clans. And I wonder if there'd be room for somebody like that would attach to a quartet in a way that would, bring, a setup where they're really seeking to have somebody have one of the three strands, so to speak, from really more the outside,
right,
that brings in.
Or maybe something happened where someone, like I remember we were talking about last week that maybe the person who was coming in was like a traitor. The hero was like a traitor, not a traitor like a Benedict. What's his name?
Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold. Yeah, my brain just saying Benedict Cumberbatch, and I'm like, that's the actor. Not I want to talk about the traitor. Not that kind of traitor, but like a trader.
Right.
Someone with spices and pelts and coming in to trade wares and caravanist kind of guy who comes in and maybe unwittingly puts his name in a hat, and then they use the knowledge of the ancients, and he gets like assigned to do a thing. He kind of like unwittingly gets put into the system.
So, sorry, go ahead.
And then they're kind of like, well, tradition dictates that you have to respect this. And he's like, I don't know tradition at all. And he's like, well, tradition dictates that you have to go and learn this forging at this mill that they've set up, right? That's what tradition dictates, And he is forced along. He's forced to go along, but just the fact of how he acts and how he treats people and the way he is breaks a lot of their sort of ingrained systems, therefore kind of forcing them to reevaluate and forcing them to look at it, and then also forcing them to kind of wonder, okay, well, if the knowledge of the ancients decided that he was going to do this, maybe it isn't family-based this whole time. Maybe it's something else based. Maybe we're the ones who's structuring things around family, and that's not what it was supposed to be originally structured around, kind of thing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that. I'm thinking that, like the Lucy's family having this capability of manipulating temperature of substances has the potential of kind of becoming a rising star, and gaining a position that is beyond just their clan and ancestral holdings, so to speak.
Right.
And this guy from the outside has a wide range of contacts and experiences and applications for the secret of the flame, so to speak. I could see, kind of a blossoming or an evolution of taking a leap forward in terms of this social structure.
Right. There has to be something like. The thing is that's really hard is that it's really easy to write stories about social structures that are built wrong.
Yeah.
And people come in and show how they need to be built right.
Yeah, and have a revolution or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what I'm thinking of is that like the villain is coming in to destroy the social structure.
Right.
The hero doesn't need to do the villain's job.
No, he just wants to.
So I've got a little bit of an idea here. So part of a different idea I was tossing around for a hero was trying to use that guy that was coming in that Reed had been talking about last week. And either he, let's say, is unbeknownst a distant, like lost relative of one of the tribes or clans.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's part of why he's like, he doesn't think he's there or part of, whatever it is, but he's stopping through. And I think maybe what it is. So they basically assign him a quartet, but he's pretty daft to the customs. He's pretty daft to the ways. Although I don't know if we wanted something to bring up that there was some kind of, I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but some other like prophecy about this guy's quartet that was supposed to do something great. And so it's got everybody wondering. And somehow I think then he gets paired with Lucy, who also is given a quartet. If that doesn't seem unreasonable.
Right. That seems right.
And so then she is kind of paired up with him. They kind of have their own, their own class, their own apprentices that they have underneath. But she's basically been assigned to him to basically kind of not keep his nose to the ground. That's the wrong word, but kind of keep, because he's kind of a fish out of water. Like at first he's like, oh, I'm going to leave. But then like he tries to leave and his cart breaks. And it's like kind of fate kind of saying, no, you're stuck here. You can't leave. This is, so he tries to maybe weasel out of it. And then he kind of, I don't know, maybe something happens and he finds himself, kind of stuck there. Maybe reluctantly at first, and then kind of has maybe like a revelation moment where then like something's revealed, or he finds out that he's was taken as a baby from this clan and brought to the coast, and so he's really he really belongs here. I don't know, something like that. Where then basically he's then bringing up and he's trying to teach different ideas of like capital investment and trade and things that he's bringing in as like a traveling merchant of these different things. That it's really something that a lot of people in this kind of closed village of these different clans, they've not seen much of this. Sure, travelers come through, but the concept of, investing capital into greater compounded investments and, trading, this box of nails for a basket of fruit because down the line they don't have fruit and you can get, more money for it. To them, it was just trying to adjust where they stood in the family, and that would get them the better pasture, the better seat on the council or something like that. And so it's a pretty foreign concept, I think, in general, for this idea that, trading things of value to gain something of greater value and prominence rather than, so it's not necessarily like an upheaval to the established structure.
Right. It serves only to complement the established structure. That's what I was thinking. Something that would complement the established structure and let the structure take its place, not as the absolute rule that everyone rules their life by, but by the willing way that people experience their families. It's like the farmer, the shepherd and the farmer, who are brothers, no longer have to work really hard to get to be the top in position, right? So that they get access to the nicest field and pastures. Right, because the shepherd now understands the idea of selling or renting or buying space, a different field, so that his brother can like plant his crops here, right? It's about like seeing each other as real people and not letting everything be about just the family,
and the way we've always done it.
Right.
I think maybe something he brings in too is the idea. So kind of on that idea, you have these people. Yes, we've farmed this land for years. It used to be very fertile, and like the crop has been getting worse and worse and worse, and like the pastures where the sheep graze are just getting kind of bare and bare and bare. And like he comes in and he's like, "Don't you rotate?" Like, right. What do you mean rotate? These have been the ancestral sheep fields for 1,000 generations. Like, what do you mean my fathers have farmed this? Well, your brother's the shepherd, right? Well, yeah. Well, you know what the pastures are now, right? Really fertile ground, and you know that planting these same crops here year after year is going to deplete the soil. Like, oh.
Right. But I don't know. Part of me feels like it's kind of mean to farmers and to shepherds to say that they wouldn't just figure that out themselves. It's like you don't really need a trader to come in and tell a farmer that he needs to like rotate his crops every once in a while, unless they're so ingrained in the family system, or this is how we do it, or, don't ask questions, just do it this way. You know what I mean? I just, I'm trying to find a good reason why. I think that personally, what I think that the family system should just kind of be going on, but what it does is it creates lots of red tape. So the family system's fairly efficient, and people jockey for bigger positions, right? But that's just kind of, the people who want to jockey for bigger positions end up getting their crops out late, and that's just kind of how it is. And you get your crops in on time enough years, and all of a sudden you want to start jockeying for bigger position, and then the same thing that happens like with the family, it gets too big, they go to war, they get smaller, they return to their roots, you get really big, you start jockeying for position, you don't get your crops in, and your family gets is hungry for a season, and then you kind of get knocked down a peg, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think should be. He brings in ideas of trade, right? Ideas of connection with the outside. Breaks down things like arranged marriages, forced weddings, systems that are really family heavy, that are like really family planning heavy, and introduces more ideas of like, don't decide when they're 3 years old who they're going to get married to because it benefits you politically. That's mean to do.
I'm going to say, yeah, when they're 3, that's not right. But I'm going to say, what do you have against arranged marriages?
I don't know. I'm not really willing to talk about it right now. So the big issue is when the villain's kind of posse starts to roll through town, right? And starts to talk to people at the bars and kids, young boys especially, who feeling maybe like their fathers are asking a little bit too much of them, or maybe not quite giving them quite as much as they think they deserve. Basically anyone who feels ill content to like come and join this new clan, this new family, this new thing, right? And they are all guided by and in the family of the villain, right? And he says that he's about, the breaking of the political social order and stuff like that, but he really just sets himself up as the high father, right? Of this new place, this new clan. And he starts to make war with these other families and starts to, not war at first, but really, makes it difficult.
Like Scottish Highlanders, like raiding and picking up stray cattle and
killing sheep and burning not forests, but burning crops, and just kind of being a nuisance, but never sticking around to stand up for their family name, because their family name is the broken, the outcast, the bastards, so they can just run away.
I have a picture in my mind of Samson tying the tails of the foxes together and tying burning firebrand and setting them off in their Philistines' field.
Yeah, the Philistines' wheat fields.
Yeah.
So let's progress the story a little bit with the story elements that we have. So the hero came into town, somehow got assigned to it was discovered in some strange way that he was in the family, and then got assigned to a quartet at the mill to work under the Lucy's father and mother, for however long it takes for him to. I don't think that he has the gift, the heat pull gift,
the secret of the flame.
I don't think that he has that, but I think that he's going to learn how to just be a smith.
Yeah.
And then we see kind of increasing attacks coming from the the bastard. I don't know. I don't remember what his name was. I don't remember if I gave him a name or not. But from him and all of his posse, who like bring like have legitimate issues, right? With the way that the family has organized power and has given like political power to family members only, and has like removed power from people that they don't like. What do you think, Seth? Is this a decent stopping place, or should we keep going?
So I have kind of a question with is the villain, is because we really haven't compounded. Maybe we can bring that up on another time if someone has an idea and they think they can work it into a different element. But like, what family? Because we haven't really established like too many of the different families. We just like, is there a particular family that this guy has come from, or
right? My thought that there was 5 children originally, right? And one of them was a daughter. At least one of them was a daughter, which is where the wise old woman comes from. And each of the 4 other sons or daughters each had kind of like a specialty or like a specific interest, you know? One, I would say, is like the ones who live far away, the ones who live on the coast, the ones who don't really engage in this family sort of political system. There's like millions of them, and the idea of like the ancestral stuff is like so incredibly minute because there's so many of them that it's just not even a thing. So that would leave like 3 other main families, you know, 2 boys and a girl. And each of those kind of represent a different, either like one is kind of like really much more spiritual, much more like listen to the ancestors. And one is a lot less that because they're kind of on their upswing years where there's a lot more of them, you know, and one's kind of in the middle that's always been the careful and steady hand, you know. He's the middle brother, the one that was oftentimes overlooked, but typically pretty competent, you know, and like able to step in and kind of quell any issues anyone had, you know. And I think that's the one that Lucy is a part of, and that what's his name, the hero, is a part of.
We called him Damascus last time.
Damascus, perfect. That he's a part of. How does that sound? Does that sound like a decent? I don't know. Have any names? For them?
I think that gives it a decent setup for like anything going forward, so we can kind of understand. One, say maybe so not the eldest. So you have, let's say there was 3 boys and then 2 girls, or a boy. Okay, as far as birth order, a son, a daughter, another son, and then the daughter. The wise old woman would then come from the youngest daughter.
Yep, that makes sense.
The eldest
is the one who walked away. You don't think so?
I don't think so. Normally in a family structure thing, you know, if you have, I don't know, eldest normally kind of pulls a bit more weight. Let's say he's always been the one that's been a little bit more prominent. He's always been, you know, maybe, you know, he's always been, you know, not so spiritual. He's always been, you know, very much in numbers, you know, a lot of loss to his family doesn't diminish it enough. So he's very, let's say, the least spiritually attuned, but
also the most kind of politically invested in the idea of whole family system.
Yeah. And then, so I think then the second daughter, so it's him, and then the next daughter, the next in line, she's the more, let's say, spiritually connected. Her family holds more of the, let's say, priestly role. And so that whole family is very, let's say, astute, and they're not like a self-righteous, but like a high and mighty. They're very, you know, we, you know, really honor the ancestors, and, you know, you are small fries in honoring the ancestors. And even though they might like have greater numbers and not have grand connection like the last one does, because they're the only one, they make more of a striving to listen to this still voice that they have.
Yeah, they're the ones who like come up with like what all the omens mean, like what it means if you smell sapphire, you know, and the moon is full, that means that your what's it called is coming. You know, they're constantly referencing like this is what this feeling means, even though most of it is kind of BS. A lot of it is like kind of true, and so people pretty much like go by their written understanding.
Mm-hmm. And so then that third son or third child, which would be the son. He's the more the mediator. He's kind of overlooked from being kind of the two older, high and mighty.
Right. Right.
And then you have, I would say, then the two younger ones, they're the youngest. They're more, let's say, the troublemakers. I'd say then the other brother under him, let's say his family has always been the ones that have always been, let's say, very great in numbers and always get themselves into causing contention and diminishing. Like they've had the biggest influx of having great numbers and then diminish, and then great numbers and then diminish, because they're always, let's say, just kind of antsy at the heels to, let's say, make a bigger name for themselves, and then not, and they kind of are always kept in check.
I don't want to lose the idea that one of the siblings goes off in the world, so to speak. So that
wait, which one would that be?
Levi was talking.
So there's right.
I was thinking, so instead of if the younger son, instead of he being the one who's always trying to make a big name for himself, I would feel like that's the older brother. That younger son, the youngest son, he should be the one who just kind of went away.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, he just kind of decided that this whole system was, and that it's that kind of attitude, that kind of spawned things like the book that the villain found,
Okay, so
where
most of the coastal people are what would it be, the fourth child.
Yeah. And they don't keep families. They don't, like, your family is nothing. Your accomplishments are everything.
As soon as let's say your family is the only immediate, mother, father, children, as soon as it's like an empty nest, like the family is like gone. It's their families now, and they have their families. And
it's all really small set. And it's only, because of the industrialism too, the grandparents don't live for that long, where it's like when you're in more nature and your parents, your family's around you and taking care of you, and you're not like concerned with kind of like advancing your place in the world politically, with industry and stuff like that, you can live longer. But if you're in the city where you're constantly surrounded by coal and burning coal and all these things, the like grandparents like live to be 60, 70 years old, and then they're just, that's just like the life expectancy, and so when when Damascus comes in and sees these old people who are like 100+ years old, still making their way, I said waddling. I'm sorry. Making their making their way around the homesteads. He's like shocked. He's like, I didn't know that people could live to be this old. I didn't know that this was a thing. I thought that that's just kind of what happened. You just forgot about them, and only thought about like your own accomplishments. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so then the youngest daughter is the daughter whose clan, she has one daughter. Well, she had a family. So the daughter had a family, and then that
it was one of those
daughters that everyone underneath one of her daughters died. So it was literally just the one daughter left after everyone else was gone. And she only had one daughter in her lifetime as well. And then that was it. And I have a really good way for the story to end. And we're not ending the story right now, but I just want to end it in this way. And so I'm going to tell it to you right now so that we can make it happen. Is that okay?
I have a slight idea too, but I think it might be the same that you're thinking. Maybe. We'll see.
Okay.
You say yours.
Okay. So what happens is after the villain is defeated, all of the miscreants, all of the slackers, all of the bastards, all of the outcasts are all feeling like really like they don't know what to do. And the wise old woman is there, and she adopts them all in kind of like a thing, like a symbolic, like, come to me, like I also am outcast, I also am like this. And then it, like, in that moment, it separates all of the power out to everyone, and she's like back to being just like an old woman again, no longer like tortured by the thoughts and the pressures of like all of her ancestors. Was that what you were thinking?
Close. It was close, but I like yours better.
Oh, great. Good. Anyways, that's how we're
I was going to say she adopts in everyone on the coastal thing, but I was still trying to figure out how that would all happen. But then again, they already have their kind of connections, so that's
And this way, all these people who feel like they aren't connected to anything at all, who have never felt the connection because they haven't been allowed to, all of a sudden all feel this connection with each other. And it's like a truer connection than whatever it is that the villain was able to give to them, because the villain's connection was all based on hate and hate of the people who rejected us. And the wise old woman's connection is based on love and acceptance. Anyways, we're going to continue this again next week, or should we cut it off? Is this it? Did we do it? Or do you guys want to do it again next week? What do you think, Reed?
I'm of two minds. I kind of depends on what story elements we come up with. Whether I think we should choose, randomize.
I think we should do
pick
one
story
more.
elements.
at least one more to fill in the
Okay.
space between
right.
what we've kind of developed as a end goal and where we were.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm good with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. We have more episodes on iTunes and other podcast systems. You can listen to them. If you would like me to tell you where you can listen to them, just at me on Twitter at @GetsBettercast, or send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for what we should do on this next episode, I want to hear about it. I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. Hold tight and wait, because it gets better.